This is the 6th lesson in the Blender for Beginners course series. In this video, we'll be painting our location. To apply color to the models, we'll use Vertex Paint. But first things first. Let me first show you what the final result of painting the model in Vertex Paint looks like. Let's switch to our reference, and instead of it, open an image that you can download via the link in the description of this video. All models consist of vertices, and we can assign a specific color value to each of them. To do this, let's go to the Interaction Mode menu and choose Vertex Paint. To quickly switch between modes, let's go to Edit, Preferences, Key Map. And here, let's enable the Tab for Pie menu option. Save the preferences. Now, when pressing Tab, a pie menu like this will appear with all the modes available to us. We are already well familiar with Edit mode. The most frequently used one is Object mode. We also know what Weight Paint is, and right now, we'll be working in Vertex Paint. And here we are in this workspace. The brushes have appeared at the top. Currently, we have the Draw brush selected. Let's look at the colors right away, since we'll be working with them most of the time. Using the side slider, we can increase the brightness. If we move the cursor inside the color wheel, we will change the color as well. We can also change the color using the sliders. Hue, is responsible for the hue, saturation for the color saturation, and value for the brightness. We can also type in a specific color number, hex code, or use the eyedropper tool to pick a color from the reference. Just click, and you can see that we have a green color now. To switch between these two colors, press X, and it toggles them. Here, we can also set the color we need. To the right of the colors, we have the blending modes, blend mode. Currently, the mix blend mode is selected. This is the standard blending mode. Later in this lesson, we will get familiar with some of the others. The radius determines the brush size. The most convenient way to change it is by pressing the F key. Strength, which is the opacity of the brush, is also changed using a hotkey. Press Shift plus F, and by moving the mouse, we change the brush strength. If we left-click and move the cursor over the object, we will apply colors to the vertices. Let's undo this action. Most of the time, we'll be using the Fill tool. To fill the entire object with a single color, press Shift plus K. And the color specified in our primary slot is assigned to all vertices of this object. Right now, we can see that besides the color, there is also a shadow and a certain highlight on the object. This is the shading of our object that we set up earlier. Let's go to the Viewport Shading settings and turn off the lighting. Select the Flat type. And now, we only see the local color of the object that we applied. It matches this one perfectly. Let's go back to the shading settings once more and change the Cavity Highlight type to Both or Screen. Here, we can adjust the ridge highlights and valley shadows. Let's leave them at low values so they don't get in our way. This is only necessary for us to somehow understand the shape of the objects and navigate around. But since the island doesn't consist of just grass and has a dirt section, we need to apply a brown color to certain parts of this object, meaning to specific vertices. Let's first use the eyedropper to select the color we need from the reference, and now switch to Edit mode. In Edit mode, switch to the Face Selection mode, Face Select, and select the side face loop. Holding down Shift, I select the bottom faces. I go back to Vertex Paint and activate the mask, Paint Mask, here. Hover over this icon, and we can see that the area that was selected remained unchanged, while the unselected part is highlighted with this white overlay. If we try to paint, we will notice that the overlay areas are locked, and use the Fill tool to assign the color to this part of the object. Let's disable the mask and look at the result. Besides the color itself, we will also paint shadows and highlights on the objects. Using the eyedropper, let's select the color of the grass shadow. Switch to Edit mode and select this face loop and the one adjacent to it. Return to Vertex Paint, activate the mask, turn off the mask, and look at the resulting shadow. Let's do the same for the bottom part of the island, even though it won't be visible. I activate the mask, select the color, and darken it slightly. You can also increase the saturation. Essentially, these actions make up the entire painting process. This is primarily because Blender doesn't have a very wide range of tools for the Vertex Paint mode. But some third-party developers create special editions, add-ons for Blender, and one of them is called Vertex Color Master. To download the add-on, go to the GitHub page using the link in the video description. Here we can read the short documentation for this add-on. After that, let's go to the Releases section and click on the latest current version. The download page opens here. Click on this zip archive and the download begins. You don't need to unzip the archive itself. Switch over to Blender. Now go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons. After that, click on this arrow and choose Install from Disk. Then go to your Downloads folder and select the downloaded add-on. It will appear in the add-ons list. Let's find it, type in Vertex Color Master and activate it. The add-on appears in the right sidebar, the In panel. We can close the preferences, and let's open its parameters. There are also two color slots here, just like in Blender's main interface, and a Fill This Color button, which is an analog to Shift plus K. But we installed this add-on specifically for the Linear Gradient tool. Now, let's use the eyedropper to select a green color and a dark green color. Let's switch to Edit mode and select the top face. Go back to Vertex Paint, activate the mask, and click on the Linear Gradient button. Now hold down the left mouse button and drag the gradient to the left. Here we can see that the gradient stretches from the first color to the second. This isn't all this add-on is capable of, but let's switch to Object mode and exit the isolated view. In Object mode, we can also enable the display of the textures we painted in Vertex Paint. To do this, go to the Shading settings and under the Color parameter, choose Attribute instead of Material. Right now, some of our objects, like these stones for example, don't have their modifiers applied. For instance, there's a bevel modifier here. We will have to apply them before working on painting these objects. Otherwise, we won't have access to their topology. Let's make a backup copy of our project first. To do this, instead of Ctrl plus S, press the combination Ctrl plus Shift plus S, which means Save As. I'll create another folder and place the new version of the file there. Now, in this file, we can safely apply any modifiers, knowing that we have a backup copy with the objects as they were before applying all modifiers. Because after applying them, we won't be able to roll this action back. Let's move on to the collection with the stones. It's located in our Island collection. Right-click on the collection and choose the Select Objects function. All the stones inside it are now selected. Let's check this. Right-click and choose Convert to Arrow Mesh in order to apply all the modifiers. Let's paint one of the stones, switch to Vertex Paint, and select the colors from the reference using the eyedropper. I'll choose a dark color and a light color as well. If you want, you can adjust, for example, the hue or the saturation. We switch to the front view and apply the base color using Linear Gradient. To align the gradient vertically or horizontally, hold down Shift. I release it, and we've applied this color. Right now, we can see a certain highlighting of the edges, but that's because we have Cavity enabled in our shading settings. Let's turn it off, and we can see that there is actually no highlighting on the texture itself. To make it look just like the reference, let's switch to Edit mode, select one of the faces, and then go to Select Similar Area. In the settings, increase the threshold value, Threshold, until all the bevel faces are selected. Done. Now we go back to Vertex Paint, activate the mask, and use the Adjust HSV function. With it, we can change the color of the selected area of the model. Let's open the settings and increase the brightness value. Now we can see that the mask has been reset. This happens because this add-on doesn't work perfectly fine. The developer hasn't fixed one of the bugs. Let's undo the action. And to bypass this error, let's switch to Object mode, then back to Vertex Paint and click Adjust HSV again. Let's leave the value at 1.1. Unfortunately, there are no recent updates coming out for this add-on, so we have to use this workaround method of switching to object mode first and then back to Vertex Paint mode. Let's move on to the next object, and to switch to its painting mode, press Alt plus Q. And just like that, we quickly switched over. Let's paint it, switch to the front view, click Linear Gradient, and apply it. Let's add the edge highlights. We switch to Edit mode. Select one of the faces, go to select Similar, right-click on Area, and add it to our Quick Favorites. Now this function is available by pressing the Q key. Blender remembered our last threshold value, so everything will happen a little bit faster now. We return to Vertex Paint, activate the mask, and do a quick switch to object mode. And now we can press Adjust HSV, type in the value we need, and turn off the mask. If you wish, you can change the color of the entire object, thereby creating more variation. To do this, click on Adjust HSV, increase the saturation, change the hue, and make it brighter or darker. The more variations, the more natural it looks. This makes the image look much more interesting. Since the painting process is quite repetitive, let's fast forward through this stage. You will have the opportunity to paint these models on your own, following the sequence of actions that was described earlier. Earlier, we duplicated this grass using Alt plus D, and that's why now we see that when we apply a color, it's also transferred to its linked copies. You might need to create additional topology on some of the models to paint specific areas. For example, like this path on the main part of the island. I'm cutting it out using the knife tool. Hotkey is K. We have finished painting this location, but later on, we will need to create materials, set up the lighting, and render this scene. Let's open the final image and look at the materials. Here you can notice that the water material has transparency, and the metal material looks metallic and reflective. Unlike, for example, the wood, which looks more matte, the grass has a certain stylized texture. And the building, for instance, has a certain brick texture, which we will also create using materials. Let's get to creating them. But first, let's set up our workspace for this. We won't change this one. Instead, let's go to its name. Right-click and choose the Duplicate function. We duplicated it and a copy of our workspace appeared. There are also presets provided by Blender here, but I don't recommend using them. It's better to create your own. First of all, let's switch to Material Preview so we can see our object's materials without rendering. Rendering happens in this display mode, Rendered, which we will be working with later on. Let's go to the bottom of this window and pull up to split it into two. In the lower part, we open the Shader Editor, the Material Editor. A blank workspace has opened before us. This is because we don't have a material selected or created. Let's select the main part of the castle and assign a new material to it. Click New. Now we have two nodes. Nodes are blocks with data. We have the principled BSDF node and the Material Output node. This node, Material Output, is responsible for outputting and displaying the material, while the principled BSDF manages its parameters. Here we have our main color, base color. It can be made absolutely any color, but as our base color, we will use the colors we applied in Vertex Paint mode. Press Shift plus A and the Add Node menu appears. Let's type in Color Attribute here and add this node. This node has a color output, which we can connect to base color, thereby linking them. This node pulls the data we applied to the mesh of our models. Select the created attribute and you can see that the castle is painted in the color we need. We can consider this our base material. Let's transfer it to all the other objects in the scene. To do this, let's select them. Press the A key. After that, press Ctrl plus L and choose the Link Materials function. Done. We have linked the material to the rest of the objects. Let's take a look at the principled BSDF node. Besides the base color, it has a metallic value. Metallic is responsible for how metallic it looks. Roughness determines the glossiness or roughness. The maximum value means it's rough. The minimum means it's glossy. IOR stands for the index of refraction, and alpha controls transparency. Most often, we will be working with metallic and roughness. Let's select any object that should have a metallic material. For example, this part of the cannon. Go to the material settings and click the duplicate icon. A copy is created. And let's name it metal. Increase the metallic value almost to the maximum, and we can instantly see that the object has acquired a metallic sheen. Let's select all the objects that should have the same metallic material. Last, select the object that already has this material, press Ctrl+L, and choose Link Materials. Let's assume that the stones and planks should have a completely matte material. Let's select all the stones in the scene. Go to the collection, right-click, and choose Select Objects to highlight everything inside it. Let's create a copy of the main material and name it Rock. Increase the roughness value, then press Ctrl+L. Link Materials. We'll do the same with the planks. I'll select the entire pier, duplicate the material, name it Wood, and increase the roughness value. After that, I'll press Ctrl+L and transfer this material by choosing Link Materials. We can also assign the plank material to the gates. Let's select them. And on the right, we have the material properties. Here, let's select and assign the wood material. Let's do the same thing with the cannon elements. Let's select the objects that belong to the wooden parts. Last, let's select any object that already has the wood material. After that, press Ctrl+L, Link Materials. Let's do the same with the upper part of the tower. And here we run into a small complication. The tower consists of two materials, the facade material and the wood material. For this rim, we can assign two materials to a single object at once. To do this, let's go to Material Properties and click the plus sign. A new slot has appeared, and let's specify the wood material in this slot. It isn't assigned to the object just yet, so let's jump into Edit mode. Make sure the part of the mesh we need is selected, and then click the Assign button. In this way, we have assigned the wood material to the selected region. The cloth also has its own level of roughness. So let's go to the flag, select it, and duplicate the material. Let's name it Cloth and change the roughness. I'll lower it to 0.4. Let's transfer this material to the hanging banners. Select them, press Ctrl+L, and choose Link Materials. You can notice that some patterns are overlaid on most of the objects. Here, for example, it's something like algae and some spots. We will be doing this using procedural textures in the material settings. Let's select any object belonging to the stones. For instance, this stone. Let's enter Local View by pressing / on the keyboard. And in the material settings, let's press Shift+A and add a new texture. It's called Voronoi texture. Let's place it somewhere around here. To see this texture, let's connect it to Material Output. And here we can see how it maps onto the object. Now we need to activate one more add-on. Go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons. And here, let's find the pre-installed add-on called Node Wrangler. Activate it, and now we have extended functionality inside the shader editor. Select the node we need and press Ctrl+T. Two additional nodes have appeared for us. This is the texture coordinate node, which specifies which coordinates the texture will use when mapping onto the object. In this case, object coordinates will work best, and the mapping node is needed to transform the texture, its location, rotation, and scale. Let's decrease the size of the texture. Under Scale, I'll set it to around 0.9. Now we need to edit this texture using a color ramp node. Press Shift+A and add it. It's something like a gradient. Let's drop it into the chain. To quickly preview a specific node, hold Ctrl+Shift+left-click on that node. Nothing has changed yet. Let's invert the colors. Move the black slider somewhere over here and the white one right to the beginning. Using these sliders, we can increase the contrast. Right now, we're creating a certain pattern that we will later use to apply color on top of the existing one. Let's change the gradient type from linear to constant. Essentially, the gradient is gone, and now we have a sharp split between black and white. Move the black slider to reduce the size of the spots. Well, we can make them a little bit bigger. I think this will be enough. And now let's mix them with our color attribute. That is, the colors we painted in Vertex Paint. Press Shift+A and type in Mix Color. Add the node, and by hovering over a certain socket, we can snap it to this node. Let's click. The node is connected. As the factor, we will plug in the texture we just created. We'll use it as a mask. Plug it into Factor. And for the blending type, let's choose Overlay. Let's press Ctrl+Shift+left-click to preview this texture. This color is overlaid on the object. Let's make it a bit darker so it stands out, and give it a slight bluish tint. Let's exit Local View by pressing / on the keyboard. And let's see how it looks on all the other stones. I feel like the spots are way too big, so let's go to the texture and change the scale value. We can also adjust the threshold, and we get a pattern like this. You can make your own. Let's jump back into Local View, and now we'll create the algae. Let's duplicate the Voronoi texture and color ramp nodes. Press Shift+D and move them lower down. Connect the mapping node to the Voronoi texture. Plug it into Vector. And to output the texture, hold Ctrl+Shift+left-click on the color ramp node. Let's change the distance metric to Manhattan. We get a new pattern. Let's shift the threshold value somewhere around here and work with the detail. Let's increase the detail to about 0.4. We can also change the scale value. I'll leave it somewhere around here. And let's look at the resulting patterns. Let's apply the color. Let's duplicate the Mix Color node. Press Shift+D and place it in front. Change the type to Mix. And as the blending factor, we'll specify our mask. Let's preview this texture output. Press Ctrl+Shift+left-click. Let's change the color. We'll make it a dark green, like an olive green, and also make it more transparent. To do this, let's change the white color to gray in the color ramp node. In this way, the mask has become slightly more transparent. Let's exit Local View and look at how it looks as a whole. We can adjust the scale parameter or the threshold value. It's a matter of taste. Let's work on the wood texture for the pier. To start, let's copy the nodes from the stone material. Let's copy the texture coordinate, mapping, Voronoi texture, color ramp, and the mix color node, the one in overlay mode. Press Ctrl+C. Now let's switch to the pier and create a separate wood material for it. In the material settings, click the duplicate button and name it W01. After that, let's select the entire pier except for the ropes. Let's link this material. Press Ctrl+L, link materials. Let's paste the nodes into the new wood material. Press Ctrl+V, and let's preview the color ramp node. I hold down Ctrl+Shift and left-click. First of all, let's invert the colors and change the texture coordinates from Object to UV. UV stands for Unwrap Coordinates, which is the flat projection of our model onto a plane. We need to unwrap the top planks. Let's select them. Switch to the top view, enter Edit mode, select the entire mesh by pressing the A key, press U, and choose the Project from View function. Our UV unwrap has been created. Let's open a new window and choose the UV editor. Let's see what we've got. We need the UV unwrap so we can define the direction of the wood grain for different planks. Using the scale settings in the mapping node, we can stretch the Voronoi texture in various ways to achieve a shape that looks like wood veins. For instance, squishing it or stretching it out. Let's make sure the fibers run in this direction. In this case, the optimal values turned out to be like this. You can copy them. On the color ramp, we have this position for the white color slider. The scale of the texture is 0.9. Rotation along the z-axis is set to 30 degrees, and the scale properties have these values. Let's position the veins on the rest of the planks. Select them, switch to top view, enter edit mode, select the entire mesh and unwrap them using U arrow project from view. Select the UV map and rotate it by 90 degrees so that the veins run along the planks. Press R, type in 90, and let's scale it. We can also move the UV layout to shift the texture. Let's leave it like this. Let's unwrap the pillars. Let's enter edit mode. Select the whole mesh, press U, and choose cube projection. Select the UV islands and scale them. Let's scale it in a way that makes the grain look more or less natural. Let's unwrap the posts. Select them, enter edit mode, select the whole mesh, go to the top view, and press U arrow project from view. Scale the UV unwrap and position it so that the texture maps more or less correctly. Let's apply the color. To do this, let's connect the Mix Color node into Base Color. Plug the color attribute into slot A and change the blending type from Overlay to Screen. Let's enable the principled BSDF preview by pressing Ctrl plus Shift plus left click. Let's change color B to something orangey or yellowish. Increase the transparency of the mask by lowering the brightness of the white color. And we get a texture like this. And let's also connect the principled BSDF node for the stones, because I forgot to do that earlier. Excellent. To create mossy patches, let's duplicate the Voronoi texture and color ramp nodes. Press Shift plus D. Let's connect the texture coordinates from the mapping node to the Voronoi texture and change the parameters. Let's change the value in scale. Increase detail to 0.5. We can leave roughness as it is, but let's drop the randomness value down to 0. Let's see what it looks like. Let's tweak the threshold value in the color ramp so there is less moss, and connect the color. Duplicate the Mix Color node. Change its type to the Standard Mix. Connect our mask as the factor. And let's take a look at this texture. Let's change the color to some kind of dark green. We can play around with the size. And we get a texture like this. Let's plug the principled BSDF into the Material Output node. Done. In the exact same way, we'll create the wood texture for the gates and the upper part of the tower. Let's take our material and duplicate it. Let's name it WO2. Create a UV unwrap. Change the vein color to a darker one. And using the mapping node, we change the shape. Repeat these same steps for all the other wooden objects in the scene. Once we're finished with the wood material, let's move on to creating the grass. Select the ground and create a new material for it. Let's call it grass and move on to setting it up. Let's create a Voronoi texture node. Let's hook up the texture coordinate and mapping nodes to it by pressing Ctrl plus T. Let's also create a color ramp node and connect the Voronoi texture to it. Let's preview the image output. Press Ctrl plus Shift plus left click. Let's adjust the gradient. Let's change its type to constant. And let's move the white slider roughly to the middle, somewhere around here. Moving on to the texture settings. Let's change the distance metric to Chebyshev and set the scale to around 7.5. Increase detail to 0.9. Leave roughness as it is, and we can lower the randomness value almost to the minimum. I'll leave it at 0.1. We get a blocky, square-like texture pattern. Let's apply the color. Create a Mix Color node and place it right here. Let's drag our mask down a bit and plug it in as the blending factor. Let's preview this texture. Let's change the blending type from Mix to Multiply. This way, this color is now applied to the areas of the mask where the white color is. So let's change it to a lighter shade. The Multiply Blend mode multiplies the colors, thereby darkening them. Let's see how it looks from a distance. If needed, we can shift the pattern using the mapping node. Great. Let's get to creating the brick texture for the tower. Let's select the tower and choose our default material. Let's duplicate it again and name it bricks. Let's open its settings and create a new node here. Press Shift+A and type in brick texture. Let's see how it looks on our object. Right now, it's not displaying very correctly. So let's press Ctrl+T to create the texture coordinate and mapping nodes. In the texture coordinates, let's select the UV map and jump into edit mode. Select the parts of the mesh we need. Press the U key and choose Cube Projection. The object is now unwrapped. We can adjust the size of the texture by scaling the UV map itself, or do it using the scale parameter. Let's type a value into scale. And if you want, you can also adjust the texture size via UV scaling. Choose the brick size you want. And let's look at our texture one more time. Using this parameter, mortar size, we can adjust the size of the gaps between the bricks. I suggest leaving it at a value of 0.8. These two colors control the brick variation, color 1 for the lightest ones and color 2 for the darkest ones in this case. Mortar is the color of the gaps themselves. Let's invert the colors of this texture to use it as a mask later on. Press Shift+A and add a color ramp. Slide the black and white values around. You can notice that the bricks slowly fade away towards the bottom. Let's create that effect. To do this, let's create a new texture. Press Shift+A and add a gradient texture. Let's see how it looks. Press Ctrl+Shift+left click. You can see it maps like this from the side, but we need it to be rotated by 90 degrees. So press Ctrl+T and the texture coordinate and mapping nodes appear. In the mapping node, let's set the y-axis rotation to -90 degrees and shift it along the x-axis by 1 meter. Let's adjust the texture using a color ramp node. Press Shift+A and add a color ramp. Move the sliders to bump up the contrast. Let's change the type to ease for a smoother gradient transition. Plug the resulting gradient into the mortar color slot, and let's check out the texture. You can see that the gaps are white at the top and get darker towards the bottom. Let's mix this with the color. Add a mix color node. Connect the mask as the blending factor. As the first color, A, will pass our default colors from Vertex Paint. The second color, B, will be applied to the dark areas of the texture, meaning the darkest bricks and mortar lines. Tweak it to find the right color. I decided to go with a dark red. Let's see the result. And let's connect the principled BSDF node to the output, and inside the principled BSDF, connect the texture itself, the color output from the mix color node, into base color. If you want, you can add more patterns, create textures, blend them using mix color nodes, and layer them on top of each other just like I'm doing right now. As a result, this will give you much more interesting and diverse surfaces. And I'll see you guys in the next lesson, where we'll create fire and water materials, set up the lighting, and do the final render and animation. See you there!